This content is brought to you by Algorand, which is building the future of finance. Algorand is one of the leading projects in the crypto industry. It is getting significant adoption and investments. This content is also brought to you by TaxBit, which is the leading tax service provider in the crypto industry. I'm personally a TaxBit user. It makes it so easy to plug in my exchange accounts and calculate my crypto gains and losses. So if you'd like to learn more about Algorand and TaxBit, please visit the links in the description of the podcast and YouTube video. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto channel, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. I have a special guest with me, the one and only blockchain backer.
Hey!
Great to have you on, man. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And certainly I'm excited to speak with you because every time I watch your content, I'm learning something. I'm learning about technical analysis and indicators and charting and market sentiments and things like that. So thank you for really joining me.
Oh, Tony, I appreciate you inviting me, man. We've always been friendly and, you know, you've been wanting me on the show. I've been holding back from doing interviews, but it's a pleasure to be here and I really appreciate it.
So obviously there's a lot of questions that came in from the community and I would love to learn, you know, how did you get into trading crypto? And I'm assuming you trade stocks as well. And how did you learn technical analysis?
Sure, it's a long story. You want the long version of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. First of all, I actually don't really trade very many stocks. I don't do a whole lot of stock trading because, like a lot of people, I'm a little impatient. The stock market moves a whole lot slower than cryptocurrency does. It moves really fast. Or crypto moves really fast, where the stock market moves pretty slow. But of course, I keep an eye on the stock market. And we could dive into that later if you want. Just from like a macro perspective, I do watch the stock market. Me getting into technical analysis, me getting into cryptocurrency, I got back in mid to early 2017. So the altcoins were like in this big super mega pump. Bitcoin is breaking out in its all-time high from after being in years in a bear market. And I was in some mastermind groups, some business groups that I was in because I had my own business and I was pretty much working like the 4-hour work week. I'd set up a company and I'd worked 100-hour work weeks. And I wasn't making anything from my company as I was going through the setup process. And that it eventually got to where it became extremely automated. And I only had to work, 2 to 4 hours per week. And I could just sit back and chill and was making a very good income doing that. And in my groups that I was talking with other people who did a lot of the similar stuff, they started bringing up the whole Bitcoin stuff again. And, here we are in 2017. And Tony, I'm sure you have the story too, man. I remember 2011, I was working a corporate job. A bunch of dinguses are running around saying, hey, man, we should mine Bitcoin on our computers. And I'm like, that is silly. No, and that's 2011, right? So here we are, 2017. I'm in these mastermind groups. There's these millionaires in here and they're like, hey, this Bitcoin stuff, it's looking like it's really going to be a thing. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even know Bitcoin was still around at that time. And, early 2017, then it's like, it's Easter or something like that. It's some type of holiday. And I'm at my in-laws, my wife's parents' house, and my brother-in-law is there. And he's a total, computer nerd. And he's like, I started mining Ethereum. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I set up this big rig. Like I cut all this metal and made this big rig. And we got 6 graphics cards running in it. And it's at my house running right now. And like, it's like printing money. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're into crypto too. I'm like, okay, that's it. That's the final straw. I heard it in 2011. I see these millionaires talking about it. And now my brother-in-law is getting into this. It's not going to happen, man. My brother-in-law is not going to become some big mega rich dude without me. I'm jumping in. I grab a laptop at my in-laws' house. I go upstairs and I buy Litecoin and I buy Bitcoin. And that's my entry. And unfortunately for me, the story for most of us that come into cryptocurrencies is that we come in during like this really exciting time period, right? Retail, we buy the top. That's what we do. And then the market eventually crashes. And, that's our story of how we got into crypto. And then, it weeds out the people who can't make it and people who can stomach it. But I didn't come in because it was crazy. I came in because my brother-in-law was mining Ethereum. And so unfortunately, that time period happened to be there in like, May, June, that time period where the prices were already skyrocketing and big stuff had already happened, even though my brother-in-law had been in it for a long time. But anyway, that's my entry into it, right? And so here I am, I'm looking at it. It's May, it's June, I'm getting on TradingView. I'm looking at TradingView chat and looking at ideas everywhere. You got everybody who's a braggart, right? Oh man, dude, I rode Digibyte to the moon. And it's like, if you can win, I can win. And it just was motivating because I had all this spare time. So I had this 4-hour work week thing going on. I wasn't having to pay attention to the company that I was running. And then I just dug into it. So with my business, I have to do a lot of forecasting and predicting way ahead of time, and big money with wire transfers. And so I already understood like the need for a new payment system because I was sending, tens of thousands of dollars for each wire transfer to the other side of the world, where you get no confirmation of whether or not they've received it or not. It takes days to get there. If you mess up one letter on this big sheet you have to fill out before you send this money, there's a chance that the other party doesn't receive it. So I already had this big understanding of why the current system of way we send money internationally for business is just silly. And that was really the buy-in for why I understood crypto outside of just being like a speculative investment. I already believed in gold and silver and, the dollar. And, I already had those core beliefs in there and that inflation and stuff. But anyway, I did a lot of forecasting and that was my wheelhouse. I love mathematics. It's something I'm totally into. And I found myself just sitting here staring at charts, going through ideas on TradingView, hanging out in the chat, figuring out things that worked, things that didn't work, getting things wrong a bajillion times. And figuring out, from my mistakes. And so it was something that I just spent all my time doing. I could either play video games, I could watch Netflix, I could do whatever. My wife is going to work, my kids going to school. I'm stuck at the house all day, working 4 hours a week. This became a hobby. It became something that I was obsessed with. And my brother-in-law, when he told me about it, he's like, man, I know you, man, please don't get obsessed with this. Don't let it control your life. I'm real worried that I've contributed to this and that it's going to overtake your life. I'm like, listen, man, I got it under control. It's not going to take over my life. Now I'm doing an interview on thinking crypto here. And it's taken over my life, but in a good way, right? But so, I just became obsessed with it, solving the patterns, figuring out the mathematics behind everything, and really a competitive nature within me, understanding that this is a game of everybody versus everybody, and I want to be the winner. And then, that was what really got me into it. And then I was recognizing so many things were happening out there. And then, I was looking at a lot of the TA out there, and I was like, that's not what I'm seeing. That's not what I see at all. And then finally I decided to, put together a YouTube channel and really start just kind of getting out there, the things that I'm always seeing. And here we are, man. Here we are.
So what is your brother?
That was a good answer, dude. I did make it long-winded, but there you go.
That was great, man. I love hearing the backstory and the details. It's always very interesting to me. So I'm curious, what does your brother-in-law think about you now having a YouTube channel and you have this large following?
He thinks it's cool, but my nephew, his son, thinks it's way cooler. When I see your 100,000 subscribers plaque there in the background, I've got mine right up there. I don't think you could see it, but he thinks he's just over the moon about it. So yeah, well, yeah, he's okay with it.
Well, man, I mean, you do such great TA that it almost seems like you've been doing this for a lifetime. Like you've been in this in 20, 30 years. What would you say contributed to you improving your skills? Was there any books or do any courses that, fine-tuned your skills?
I don't think there's anything wrong with doing those, but it's like being on the streets. Just, I learned from throwing myself in there and making a ton of mistakes. And I have never taken any type of courses or any type of books. It is 100% self-taught. Now there are things that like I'll reference to, right? And I'll use Google. Like I use Google all the time to search things and try to find things that, I don't know the answers to. But everything that I do, everything that I've learned is by having an obsessive mentality and living and breathing within the charts. And that's really it. And it's not, and we're not talking, as a side gig, we're not talking about, spending 3 or 4 hours a week or maybe an hour or two a day. We're talking 8 to 12 to 16 hours a day being in the charts, trying to solve things, figuring out things that do work, figuring out things that don't work. In the beginning, it was a lot of looking around on TradingView and seeing what everybody was doing. So that was like a good resource to kind of see different tools and different indicators that people are using, is looking on TradingView at all the ideas they have on there. But it definitely doesn't mean those people are using them right. I would say, over 90% of them are doing it wrong and are getting it wrong. But you can at least kind of learn different things and how people are using them, and then try to apply them in your own way. Because crypto is so volatile. It's a lot more volatile than the stock market. So figuring out the things that work in here, at least, it's just figuring out the tools. And for me, it was not like there was just a book that I could read. And I know some people like to look at candles, right? Candles are a big deal. Some people like to look at particular patterns like bear flags, bear pennants, bull flags, bull pennants, head and shoulders, the most common one everybody learns when they start. And those things are, mildly important. Sometimes they do work. But it's really more of, spending a whole lot of time in them and applying them is what worked for me. So just tons of experience of being obsessive. Like my brother-in-law said I would.
It's funny how crypto does that to you. My wife, I get the same comments from my wife, like, I think you're obsessed with this stuff. And I'm like, well, that new car we bought, that this is how I make money.
There you go.
So I want to ask, there's a lot of indicators out there, right? You got the Fibonacci, you got the Elliott wave model, you got the Gaussian channel, you got MACD crawl. There's so many. I can't even keep up. I don't even know. I can't explain all of them. What would you say is your go-to as far as an indicator or model that you found to be accurate? And I know nothing is 100% accurate all the time.
Right. For me, it's always the Fibonacci's, whether it's the Fibonacci extensions or Fibonacci retracements. And there's a lot of debate out there on whether to use standard scale or to use log scale Fibonacci's. For me, I always use standard scale. I do not use log scale fibs. With a lot of these things, we're talking about MACD, RSI, Bollinger Bands, trend lines, all that stuff. It's really trying to kind of predict time. In a trend line is kind of a axis meet of where time and price run into each other. And time is so difficult to predict. I can't find anybody. I wish there was someone out there who was really good at it so I could, learn from them, but I just can't figure out how to predict time. And I don't think anybody can yet. And if they do, they're going to be a billionaire. But for me, it's fully the Fibonacci extensions. And it's nice when you can apply other things to it. But a lot of times for me, the base understanding of how the market really reacts is with Fibonacci's. But Fibonacci's don't predict time. So time can take a really long time to play out for Fibs. And that's why we kind of want to move on to different things and look at, Bollinger Bands or relative strength, is to say, does it look like things are going to be rolling over soon? Can we predict the time to happen soon? Which they do sometimes. They do a little bit. But Fibonacci extensions are my go-to. Number one all day. If you took everything away from me, I couldn't do anything on my YouTube channel. That's the only thing I could do, Fibs.
Yeah. And I've obviously watched a lot of your content, and obviously you've made some really great predictions as far as market cycles. And certainly, like you said, no one can predict time. If that was the case, we would all be, I don't know, rich already, filthy rich or something like that. So I wanted to ask, you mentioned you bought Bitcoin and Litecoin when you initially got into the asset class. As of today, what do you hold in your portfolio? I'm sure XRP and others, but I would love for you to confirm that. And do you have like a swing trade portfolio and a long-term hold portfolio? Is it segmented?
Right. So I'm not, let me say this too as well. I'm not a financial advisor. This isn't investment advice, but I'm happy to share the things that I have. It doesn't mean they're all going to be right. And everybody should do their own research. But, you know, I don't do day trading. I don't have the patience with it. That was probably my biggest mistake in 2017 is how much time I spent day trading, because this is a 24-hour market. You're going to be up 20, it's going to ruin your sleep. And I think anybody listening to this who knows that, it will ruin your sleep over and over again if you're in all these day trades, because it's a 24-hour market. So I don't do day trading, but I do swing trading for big cycles. So we're talking, a year or 2 years. As for what I hold, I own a ton of stuff, man. Some of it being complete garbage that I've held for 4 years. Like if you were here in 2017 and 18, all the stuff that was promising then, you kind of got the bags and you're still sitting on them.
Me
but
too.
But like, my primary stuff, it's going to be XRP, ADA, Ethereum Classic, Bitcoin Cash, Zcash, Dash, Monero, think off the top of my head, EOS, and then add 20 more. But I would say that what I just named probably represents 85% of my bag, 90%, maybe something like that. I'm probably missing a couple. IOTA, I own IOTA, and I own some SIA coin that I've held for a long time in that bag.
I have
a lot
some
bigger
SIA
than
coin.
it should be. Yeah.
I SIA coin, Omisigo, all the stuff from 20.
OMG, yeah.
But I bought them so low that I'm just waiting for all boats to rise, right? And just dump them.
Right, man.
Awesome, man. So I would love for you to take us through the charts, and maybe we can start with Bitcoin. As far as where are we at in the current market cycle, and what are you expecting in the short term and long term as well?
There we go. All right. We looking good? Yep. All right.
Perfect.
So what I have here is zoomed out version of Bitcoin dating all the way back till 2010. So what we're going to do is kind of understand what Bitcoin has done. And, one of the things I've taken a lot of flack for, I get a lot of credit at the same time, but I take a lot of flack for is people think I'm very bearish on Bitcoin, and they misinterpret that as FUD, and it's not true. I was here, during all the craziness, C19 looking for a $70,000 Bitcoin, and as we've gotten here, my worries have stepped up, and I'm going to show why that is with Bitcoin, dating all the way back till 2010, and we look at this thing. And we say to ourselves, hey, it looks like, we've got a series of bull markets that have happened in here. And then, now we're in here. Is that an actual peak or not? Or is there more moving down that has to happen? But one of the things that I noticed a couple of years ago was the size of these run-ups that were happening back here in the early days of Bitcoin in 2011 and in 2013. Now, what we can notice down here on the bottom of the screen is there are some liquid wicks that happened in here. This is when Bitcoin was, 4 and 5 cents, and this liquid wick takes it down to 1 cent, near zero, right? So I was like, all right, I'm not going to account for these little illiquid wicks that happen in here, but we can kind of get the general idea of where Bitcoin was and how big its first run up was that happened in here. And we can see that Bitcoin had an equivalent run up, not accounting for these liquid wicks that take it down next to nothing. But we could see that the next bull run that occurred for Bitcoin in here was of equal length of the previous one that we had. Starting from here to here our next bull run was of an equal length. And this was a market cycle reset that happened in here. Back in this time, Bitcoin actually crashed. I believe it was 93% at this point. Let's take a look. Yeah, so you have a 93% crash that took place for Bitcoin in here. It was a cycle reset. And then we went on to have a cycle of similar size that led into another cycle reset. And then what I did, I was like, well, we know that this one in here is of equal length of the last one that we had, right? Comes up of equal length of what our last bull market was. Let's take a look at what's going on in here and see if these are constituted as like super mega cycles for Bitcoin. You know, lots of crazy volatility that happens along the way, but is this a super cycle? And then I was taking a look at Bitcoin and recognized, well, okay, we've got some similarities going on in here for what's happening throughout all of here. And so I'm going to put us over here on the US dollar version on Bitstamp so we can get a more micro look at it, because the BLX chart is updated less frequently. And here we go. We're going to take a zoomed in look at what has been going on for Bitcoin over the course of the last 6-7 years. And what we noticed is that if this super cycle was equal length of the previous super cycle, well, how is our current super cycle looking? And we could see that the run up that took place back in 2017 was of near equal length of this, and that the bottom came in at the exact same point as well. I said, okay, a lot of people, I'm questioning it myself at the time, right? Is this a whole new cycle reset? Or is this nothing more than just a pausing period that we've had in these super cycles that eventually lead to a new breakout, and not being something, that goes really crazy and really high, right? But more so that we're still just in one of these major super cycles happening in here, like we've had 2 of already. And that here we are right now within this time period right now. So what do we notice that happens in 2018 through 2020 is that even in here, it was doing the same thing that happened back in that previous super cycle. You have 1, 1, 2, 2. Then what happens is, right, so we have our first initial fall, then we have a retracement that comes back up in here, and we can see the retracement taking place right here. And we can see that for the third spot, we get to the same spot that happened there in 2019. It was like a summer run up. It was wild, went to like 14K. It was a good time. Everybody's having a great time. And then, C19 strikes, right? And as we can see, even in our fractal, in our accumulation schematic, we pull back down, which is precisely what we did down in here. Then we pull back down, have number 4. Then what happens? We go off and we break out. We go off and we break out. So we had the same fractal accumulation schematic all occur in Bitcoin from 2018 through 2020 that occurred in the previous mega super cycle. So as we've been up here, it's been all worry. Like, we realize where we are, right? You can look at the Fibonacci extensions of where we are right in here. We're getting very, very close to a 4.236 Fibonacci extension out here on Bitcoin. I'm getting very close to how high previous super cycles for Bitcoin have been. So, at that time, of course, the excitement was we're going to 100,000, we're going to 200,000. And, I'm sitting there saying, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't see anything indicating that's going to happen. We've reached out to this 4.236 extension nearly. Look at the previous, super cycles that we've had for Bitcoin. Structurally, it's all set up like the previous super cycles. And, as you could see, the prices have fallen back pretty good at this point.
So some new questions for you.
Yeah.
So obviously, on looking at the charts, the previous cycles had these mountain peaks. This time around, it doesn't look that way. So no. Is that like a vanity thing where, we want that to happen, but it doesn't mean it has to happen?
Yeah, that we're wanting it to be super fast and super blow off-ish. Is that what you kind of mean, blow off top-ish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
the same type of structure, like it looks like the mountain peak, like you're going up all the way. You have this perfect,
like this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to assume, so what we're predicting is time, right? We're predicting price in relation to time. We want price to move up really fast in relation to time, and that's not what we're getting. And so like even, everything in here has clearly been way more drawn out than even all of this was back in here. Even if we shifted over and look at the run up was slower. The accumulation in here was, I haven't even run the math on how long that is. It's maybe 8 to 10 times longer that it took for the accumulation from a time perspective than it did in previous times. And when we take things off log, hide it all, is that not a blow off?
Sure.
Right? Is it, when we just do it because we kind of spread it out like this and we say it doesn't really look like a blow off, but was it, right? Was it a bubble or wasn't it a bubble? Time is kind of all in our own mind of what we want it to eventually be.
So obviously we're talking about different possibilities and scenarios, and there are no guarantees here, right? No. So for the short term, your thesis is that we've hit our respective blow off. Bitcoin will do a retracement, then go into the bear market. But if we were to spread this out and look at it from a longer time period, potentially the bear market could run maybe it could be a short-term bear market, and then we could potentially see a blow-off top peak in 2023. Is that possible? And I know I probably threw a lot at you there.
No, it's okay. I mean, anything is possible, and I know we all would love for it to be a short bear market. So these are all theses, right? And it's all everything that I show on my channel or try to do, it's always I try to make everything based off what this market has done before. So I don't try to pull out, like you asked earlier, what's the one indicator that I would use? It'd be Fibonacci's, right? So I don't try to pull out magic indicators that have crazy kinds of cool concepts that only I understand truly. And here I'm sharing with you because I have the magic juice. So theoretically anything can happen, but it depends on how deep you want me to go, because I could take this into what these things have looked like. Would you like to move forward with this?
Sure.
Okay, so let's move on to this one right here, right? So one thing we'll actually step back, right? Let's step back. Let's go here. So one thing is we saw that the Bitcoin price chart came just a mere like 5 to 8% below the 4.236 extension. Bitcoin's price ran up over 2,000% during the bull run and came a couple of less than 10% away from hitting a 4.236 extension. One thing we can notice over here is that the Bitcoin market cap has hit a 4.236 extension. So we'll move forward and look at what has happened in other circumstances where that has occurred. But one other thing we also know is that Ethereum as well, its market cap did hit a 4.236 extension there on November 10th or November 11th. So, then it comes into the thesis of what comes next. Is Bitcoin in accumulation, or is this all good? Is this going to turn out and break out into much higher pricing, or is Bitcoin actually in a real bear market? And what we've been talking about a lot on my channel has been the structure of how Bitcoin's price has dropped. And this is a bear market fractal that was taken from back in 2018. I'll zoom out and we'll point to it right there. It looks like I left a lot of stuff on there. You can see this is that time period that we're going to be referencing to. This is a bear market time period for Bitcoin in 2018 that took place from March all the way until July, run up in July. So this whole area right here is very similar if not near identical, to what has been happening to the Bitcoin price right now. So Bitcoin's been, its price action has been behaving as if it is in a bear market. So, you know, the things that I hope for and wish for is that there's some type of retracement that comes in for Bitcoin. And I'll explain why that is here in just a second. But one thing that we can look at that's been happening for Bitcoin has been by studying what the reversal structures for Bitcoin look like. And on the top here, I have the Bitcoin price chart that we're all used to. And down here, I have the bottom of Bitcoin's bear market that took place back down in here. So this is a common reversal structure. We see this at bottoms, we see this at tops, we see this all over the place. And I reference this a lot over on my YouTube channel. And sometimes we get kind of caught into what things look like based on our biases. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll flip charts upside down or invert them to say, hey, let's pretend we're looking at it from this direction, right? And if we zoom in on what the bottom of Bitcoin looked like back in 2018, we can see undeniable similarities that were occurring on the major reversal for Bitcoin back then.
Wow.
And I talk about these things a lot. For crashing structures, and essentially we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You roll back up to wave 4. Within wave 5, you hold it. It's similar to what we had happen for Bitcoin at its bottom. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rolls back up to wave 4, and then it goes on and sets its low. So when we were going through all the chaos back in May, June, and July of 2021, when Bitcoin's price fell massively in May, I was referencing back to this a lot to say, hey, look, we have very big similarities going on here that typically happen in bottoming structures. And I'm going to be looking for Bitcoin to still set a new all-time high, but not by much, because this is what long-term reversals typically look like for charts. And that, and while this is moving down, we can look over here on the right side of the screen and see as I move my cursor down, the price of Bitcoin is moving up. And that's because I have the scale inverted. This is what we're all used to looking at for the last year and a half. So where we're at right now from a reversal standpoint looks very similar to what major reversals look like. And if we invert Bitcoin here, you can see how these things eventually go. They don't go very well from a long-term perspective. You eventually see an ABC correction come in here, which on Bitcoin's standard scale would be an A, B, C, and then you see where the price goes after that. It has a big fall that occurs after that time period. So my belief is that, based on super cycles that we've seen, right? Based on the fact that we've seen these things all happen of these similar sizes, that this was not a pause. This was not a cycle reset. This was more of a pausing period, and that we have seen in previous market cycles before. And that there's the very good possibility that we're seeing a long-term top for Bitcoin. And, that's the news nobody wants to hear. Sure. But, when we look at it, in everything I do, I'm not trying to pull magic out of my hat. I'm not trying to, say I have a magical indicator to tell you what's going to happen. It's just based on, this is going to be the third time we've now done a super mega cycle of this magnitude. It also lines up with fibs, the things that are the most important to me. And we see it over here on the market cap. We see them also happening with Ethereum at the exact same time. And we see bear market structures happening for Bitcoin in here. So this is not something that happens in a bull market. We reference to this from the past. Like I try to do everything, what happened in the past. This was something that happened in a bear market. And the thing that happened after something like this played out was that, eventually Bitcoin rolled over and capitulated much lower, right? So, you would see if that continued, which, totally up for debate. It's insane that it's actually followed this. I think that's the thing I need to also take note of. Yeah. Market makers, what are you doing? This is crazy. This is identical.
This is so eerie. This is so eerie. I can't believe and once again, it's just, I don't know. Like you said, this could deviate, but it's so crazy that it's following this so accurately.
It is unbelievable, and it's a thorn in my side too, as somebody who's trying to figure things out. That all I do is come on my channel and say, we're still doing this. So it's getting annoying at this point. Eventually they usually break away from these things, but in these types of structures, these lead to bigger crashes coming later based on what has happened with Bitcoin previously.
So you believe that once again, Bitcoin and Ethereum have hit their respective peaks. They're going to go through the retracement. What do you think the retracement peak might be for both Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Right. So, based on history, which is what I always do, right? This retracement that took place back here in 2018 went to a Fibonacci 702 retracement. And I'll zoom in on that in a minute. It's going to be hard for your audience to see that. And then the top that came in back in 2013, it retraced after it completed its big fall. It retraced back to a 786 Fibonacci retracement. So let's see if I've lost everything here. I sure have lost everything. Okay, that's okay. That's how we do things. All right. So if you're going to have a retracement that happens from here, these are Fibonacci retracements. Bitcoin has a tendency to respond, to go back to these types of price levels. So that's what my hopes and dreams are, that somehow Bitcoin works its way back up in here. And it's historically how Bitcoin does usually operate. When it has really big falls, it does a retracement. We can see it goes back to a 702 retracement, which is a staple of my YouTube channel. That's a halfway point between a 618 Fibonacci and a 786 Fibonacci, right here in the dead middle. We can see Bitcoin retrace back to that level and turned over. This happens all the time for Bitcoin. This is what happened back here in September and October of 2020, where everybody was fearful we were going to repeat a C19 style event happening in here. We could see we retraced and then turned over and went much lower. We could see at the peak of 2018, after the first big initial fall came in here for Bitcoin, it retraced back to the 702 Fibonacci retracement once again. And typically, even in all these run-ups that happen here in Bitcoin, once you have your first big initial fall, it's very common that after that first fall, you retrace back to the 702 Fibonacci retracement. It's not always perfect, doesn't always hit 702, but typically somewhere around a 618 to 786 is very common. So if we are seeing a long-term top come in over here for Bitcoin, the common thing that we see is some type of retracement come in before another leg comes out. Another leg comes in. Markets don't typically just move straight down in straight lines. Typically, usually, you're going to have higher highs and higher lows, or, in a bull market, but in a bear market, you're going to have lower lows, lower highs. And, you just keep bouncing on your way down. And the way people will measure those bounces and say, how do I play this thing, is by measuring Fibonacci's. And so historically, with how often we've seen the repeats happen of Bitcoin going back to a 702 Fibonacci retracement, and, that's kind of the region I'm looking at. And the fractal that we were just looking at for Bitcoin as well took us right up here to about a 618. So $55,000, $58,000 is a typical retracement for Bitcoin if it's going to behave like it normally behaves.
Right.
So,
and
long-winded.
No. This is great, man. You're so great at what you do here.
Thank you.
What do you think about, though? Could we see? And we talked about the deviation with this black swan potential events with Russia, Ukraine, and then you got the Fed and interest rates. Could those things be the catalyst that once again makes us deviate and it doesn't do what we're expecting?
Sure. I mean, anything is remotely possible. One of the things I always try to take note of is, and it doesn't mean I'm going to be right, is, news, right? News cycles and how they work. If you remember back in February, March, April, what was going on here? You got Tesla adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. You got CNBC really opening up the shill factory for Bitcoin. You got a lot of these guys putting laser eyes, and it becomes this big, huge market. You have celebrities. Remember all the celebrities on Twitter really promoting Bitcoin? And it was all positive all the time, all really good stuff. Then what happens? Market turns over, and then what comes in down in here, right? You have like the 6 month period for the unlocking of all the grayscale Bitcoin was going to happen in here. You had Tesla no longer accepting Bitcoin to buy, Tesla vehicles. You had China banning Bitcoin mining. You got all your negative news that comes in down in here. And then what happens? We move back up to the top, and what happens? Euphoria happens all over again. Excitement happens all over again. There's no real negative news going on up in here. Everybody's really excited. Everybody's FOMO buying the top. We head down. There's no real negative news. Everybody's like, well, what's the negative news? And then we get down in here, down to the lows, and what do we have? We have a big fear factory all over again, right? We've got Russia and Ukraine. You have the unstable emergency stuff going on over there in Canada. You have Federal Reserve interest rate hikes, and then you have the potential executive order coming out of the White House, right? So you have all these things to really kind of be scared of at the lows. Whereas we didn't have those at the highs, and we keep recognizing over and over again, the news cycles and the events all seem to be, occurring when retail sentiment is shifted in one direction.
So real quick question here. This might be a silly question to ask, but I've heard someone say, show me the charts and I'll tell you the news. So does the news follow the charts, or does the charts follow the news? What do you think about that?
All right, so we go back in here, right? So how many examples? I just showed several examples of 702 Fibonacci retracements, right? And how common that is for a 702 Fibonacci retracement to occur, and then for the market to turn over on itself, right? And what we noticed happened back in February is that the prices are rising with higher highs and higher lows. And then eventually we set our first lower low, right? You can see, boom, we get our first lower low happen right in here. And as we go back into this retracement, right back here, right when we get back to the 702 Fibonacci retracement, right here on May 8th, what was going on in the world at that time, right? What was getting retail investors to FOMO buy the top? And Elon Musk goes on Saturday Night Live, right? It's just the ultimate get retail to buy the top. And where do they buy it at? They buy it literally at the retracement level, the one that happens to be the most devastating one of all of them throughout the history of Bitcoin. And the news and the event all coincided to occur at this time to get them to buy the literal top right here on May 8th when he was on there. And I'm not sitting here saying, Elon Musk had anything to do with it. Maybe I talk about all the time, maybe there's a hidden hand. Maybe we're in a simulation. Maybe there's a puppet master pulling puppet strings. I don't know, but these things always show up when they're supposed to show up. And it's very odd to see that happen. And to see these things occur when they're supposed to occur on charts. It's hard to pinpoint it all the time, but there's no question that we can see that, and whether this area holds, the past is going to dictate whether or not it's right or not. But we know that retail investors were incited to FOMO buy Bitcoin up in here in the 50,000s back in February through May. Didn't work out. We know they were given a ton of fear news narratives. We know they were all excited again, and we know we're down here again, and we're getting a bunch of negative news narratives. That's where you kind of originated from. Of course, anything can happen, man. I mean, sure. And I don't even want to say words on your YouTube channel to get you in trouble for anything. But I mean, if bad things happen, I mean, we don't know. Sure. We can do our best chances to guess. But what we are noticing is that all throughout here, we didn't have a bunch of fear. We didn't have a ton of it at all. We get down in here and now we're all real fearful of things, and yeah, we'll just have to see. Yeah.
Okay, so you gave us the retracement price point for Bitcoin to peak 55 to 58. What about Ethereum? What do you think? What price level would that hit on the retracement as well?
And whether or not Ethereum is going to behave in the exact same manner, right? So this is Bitcoin, excuse me. Whether or not Ethereum is going to behave exactly the same. Here you go. I'll zoom in on Ethereum. If it did something similar. And, we're also guessing that that's the actual bottom right there, which we're we're not certain yet if that is the actual bottom. But if it was, a 702 retracement for Ethereum is right there around $4,000. So
I want to jump to XRP because I know a lot of folks are going to want to know,
Sure.
what's your outlook on the charts for XRP as alt season? Let's say alt season follows Bitcoin's retracement. Tell us about that and then XRP specifically.
Sure. So let's build up to that. One thing about XRP is that, okay, I own XRP. I've owned XRP for a very long time. But one thing I'm realistic about is that XRP has only had major bull runs during altcoin seasons or time periods where all boats are rising, the whole market's moving up together, or at least the whole altcoin market is moving up together. There's never been a time period where XRP has been rising independently. So one of the things that I do is I try to spend a lot of time focusing on when do these alt seasons happen? If XRP is going to take off and it's going to go on this major run, then the conditions of the market historically tell us that the whole market needs to be running at the exact same time. And we can see throughout history, during major topping periods for Bitcoin, that is when alt seasons have happened. In 2018, the peak of the alt season happened into the retracement. So into the 702 retracements. One of the reasons we keep focusing on that and talking about a retracement, and if there's this opportunity for the altcoins to run, because in 2018, that's when the big blow-offs happened. But we can notice right in here, these are all the major alt seasons that have happened in the cryptocurrency market, and including in 2021, we have one right over here. So what I've taken is these are the top 50 coins from early 2021, February of 2021, to show how the market has behaved as a whole. And I'm going to take everything off the screen to show the pivotal moments of when these alt seasons have occurred. And one thing we have here is this is the market cap of Bitcoin right up here on the top. And we can notice that as Bitcoin was breaking out into this all-time high right in here, this was a time period where the altcoin market all ran up together. We can all see that was a big time period for the altcoin market. After that, the altcoin market went pretty dead until we got to this retracement and the top of Bitcoin to where the blow-offs all happened in here. So we know that these two periods of big moves in the altcoin market occurred A, after Bitcoin was breaking out, and B, when Bitcoin was topping. And so if we look over here to 2021 and 2020, we can see this is the time period where Bitcoin was breaking out into its all-time high and topping for this portion. And we could see the whole market moved up together. And as we notice, all of the market is staying still in here, right? The top 50 from early 2021. And I see a lot of people always asking, hey, can we take a look at this coin? Can we take a look at that coin? We can look at what the top 50 from February of 2021 look like. This is your whole top 50, man. It's not just been, one coin in particular. This is the whole top 50 of the market that has all gone flat or down ever since May of last year. So one thing we see is hey, there was a rise of all boats together that took place here as Bitcoin was breaking out into an all-time high, similarly to like what occurred back here in 2017. But what we notice here is that if this is Bitcoin's top, if it's hit a 4.236 extension, where's the missing element here? We've seen this happen multiple times. When the top of Bitcoin actually comes in, all the altcoins rise together. It's happened in 2013, and there's a lot of other coins that were in here in this time period, such as Peercoin, Namecoin, Feathercoin, Novacoin, a lot of old school stuff. All of them did the same thing back in this time period. But we're missing that element in here. So what was the condition that sent the peak, at least, right? We've seen two previous times there's this big run up that happens as the market peaks for Bitcoin. What is the condition? And the condition for those peaks to happen in the altcoin market again was when Bitcoin was in a retracement. So I focus on Bitcoin a lot to say, look, if we've topped And if we're going into a retracement, these are the conditions that have happened before. And if XRP is going to have some type of bull run, I know we all want to have it to where it's like, you know, it's going to go off and it's going to go running on its own. And man, I've wanted to believe that too. Like, yeah, I want it to, but you know, throughout history, when we look at it, I'm going to show you. Get it all off the screen. Let's find XRP. It's right here. It's hard to see. It's this orange one right in here, but it as well only went up on its major runs during alt seasons. So while I would love to say, hey, the SEC thing is going to settle, all the exchanges are going to relist XRP, we're going to be rocking and rolling, XRP is going to go to the moon, the condition that I know is that, well, there has to be an alt season if we don't count on just that happening.
Sure.
So that's really why my main focus is on, hey, let's see if this alt season can get roaring based on what has happened in the past. That, you know, at the tops of cycles, we've seen two different time periods where alt seasons roar. One, when Bitcoin's breaking out into new all-time highs after a multi-year consolidation, and two, as tops come in. And we also know in 2018, it happened into the retracement is where the chaos really happened for the market. So as we go into the retracement, can we get the chaos to happen in the entire market? And my anticipations for Bitcoin, my anticipations for Ethereum were all those 4.236 extensions. Getting up to those price levels has been, you know, my anticipation all this time, and has been my anticipation for XRP as well, which clearly hasn't gotten up there. Because the condition of the rest of the market isn't there. The condition of the rest of the market is still stuck. But, you know, historically, XRP has been the #3 altcoin in the cryptocurrency market. I don't see why I could change my own personal views that it wouldn't reach out to similar price levels of what Ethereum and Bitcoin have done, which would be like 4.236 extensions, if not 4.236 extensions. Well, Ethereum got to this area right here. Bitcoin got to that area right there. It's still $10 to $13, somewhere in that range if it was to follow what occurred with the rest of the market. But, you know, we'd be hoping for it to happen pretty soon if this market's going to go into a retrace and repeat what this market has done before. So fingers crossed for sure. But
Yeah,
that, you know, this is what we saw Ethereum and Bitcoin do. You know, XRP has been #3. Why can't the #3 do it?
Yeah,
I don't see why not.
Absolutely. Well, I'm praying for that to happen. That would be awesome.
Oh, and let me show this. Let me show too. So like, you know, and one of the things too is XRP has been stuck in here, right? And we can look at like what previous run-ups have looked like at that time period. And, you know, we've seen that this has been a pausing period before as well. I'll set these things in here and you can kind of see it. There are some wicks that go a little bit lower, but we've done this before. We've gotten to this height before and paused out before. And even this, it still gets you up to like $9, right? So it's all in that area, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And fingers crossed, man.
For sure. Awesome, man. This is awesome. I wanted to ask you, because we're running up on time, you've been exploring NFTs. What do you think about that market and how it's been booming?
It's interesting, man. You know, I don't own any NFTs yet. I'm not ready to own any yet, but I think it's interesting, and it's hard because it's so vast, right? It's so big, and you know, whenever I just talk about specific topics, it's like, well, blockchain backer, there's so much more to NFTs. Don't just talk about this, talk about all of these wonderful other things. And I'm like, well, look, hold on. Let's just lay this out on the line. I spend 99% of my time in the charts. I'm not an NFT expert, so don't kill me. But you know,
you can't even chart NFTs at this point, right?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Not in trading view, at least. I think it's interesting, you know, and there's so many different things about it, right? Whether it's going to be with music or whether it's going to be with artwork or with videos or, you know, digitized property and everything like that. But, you know, the one we see in our face the most is the stuff we see all over Twitter. Hey, check out my project, check out my cartoon set of 10,000 that I've made. You you know, because of the explosions of the Bored Ape Yacht Club and crypto punks and that kind of stuff, there's a huge market for it. I mean, the cheapest Bored Ape you can get, when I checked the other day, was $300,000. So there's going to be a lot of copycats going after that. Everybody's going to try to create all these markets to, or all these different projects to do it. And it's very easy to create these 10,000 picture sets. Very, very easy. Anybody could do it in a day. One day you could create the whole 10,000 and you could get it on OpenSea. So it's, you know, whether or not there's much to that. And, you know, I think there is. I mean, because a part of it is like, look how wealthy I am. You know, in real life, people walk around, you know, they've got, you know, diamond rings, diamond earrings, you know, fancy shoes, fancy shirts, fancy cars, and they just want to feel special. They want to feel above everyone else. And on the internet, it's harder to do that. We're all just equal plebs. But when you know, you've got proof, like, you know, Twitter's given you the ability to actually integrate your NFT into your Twitter profile. And, you know, you get to kind of flaunt that. You get to have your jewelry a little bit. And whether or not it's going to be anything to do with those avatars, or it's going to go in a completely different direction, I think people want to have this identity online and represent a little bit of their wealth. And what direction that goes in yet, I'm not sure. I'm not an expert in this field, but I see value in, you know, this secondary world that we have. We have our real life world, like you and me talking, Tony, although we're doing it on the internet. But, you know, I go hang out with my wife, I hang out with my kids, I go walk, you know, throw some Frisbees or something like that. That's my one world. And then my second world is my Twitter world and my chart world and my digital coins world. And there's these two different worlds. And I think we spend so much time in this digital world that we want it to feel more like we have that wealth or respect of the people around us. And I don't know. I think there's something there. I don't know what direction completely it's going to go in, but I think there's something there for sure. I think it's a huge, huge industry. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. We have our digital lives, and it's going to become more built out, and we can become more immersed in it eventually. I think, you know, what they call the metaverse, I think we're living in Metaverse 1.0. We have our personas online. Eventually, we'll have avatars and create VR worlds and whatever it is. I think that's the next phase.
Yeah, and I don't know how developed it's going to get with like a metaverse style thing, but I do think we are all gradually, you know, 20 years ago, the internet was, you know, are you spending too much time on the internet? What are you doing? But now it is so accepted of us that it is absolutely a part of our lives. We have our phones in front of us all the time. If we're watching TV, we got our phone in our face at the exact same time, right? It's an integrated part of our lives. And to see that develop further to where we feel like we're more integrated into that, and not just some stranger on the internet, but a true identity of who we really are, and people can respect it beyond that. I don't know. I think so, dude, for sure.
Well, I'll talk to you offline about NFT stuff, because I want to get into it as well. I don't know.
Let's go on the journey together, bro.
Cool. So I got some wrap-up questions here for you on the metaverse. You know, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be about?
Let me ask you this. What is your definition of a metaverse?
You know, I'm personally thinking it's essentially being able to create a certain sort of customized environment. Yes, almost like a video game. Not looking cheap and pixelated like what we may have now, but eventually like literally what you see in the movies, and that may be 10 years from now. But being able to do that, but also there's, you know, the ability to probably go shopping, and they have virtual malls and do things like that. And once again, we may be a bit way off, but like I would create like a Blade Runner theme world, and I can invite friends, and I don't know, maybe play some sort of game in there or something. I don't know.
Yeah, man. No, that's how I think about it too. Like, you know, is this the metaverse that we're already living in? This is, like you said, Web 1.0. This is kind of right. It is kind of. It's just not super immersive. But when I think of like a metaverse, it is something that feels incredibly super immersive. And if I could have and I imagine it as just being a video game. That's really all I think about. I think of it as But, you know, maybe we do spend real money in there. We build these real lives within these things, and they become really important and super big to us. But for me, it would probably be something like a World of Warcraft type world, or an Elder Scrolls Online type world. I don't know if you've ever played those games before, but you can, you know, pretty much go on any experiences that you want. Take your friends with you. There's some danger, there's some scary stuff, but you can always go back to Stormwind City, man. You can always hang out and chill and shop and socialize and do that and relax, take a nap. But I would something fantasy and fun and adventurous, and not being super boring of like, welcome to our metaverse, where we do exactly what we do in this real world, where we walk into buildings and we sit at conference tables and we talk to each other and we go have coffee at Starbucks. I would want it to be exciting, like a real video game.
Yeah.
The only thing I wonder though, man, like, what if it becomes too good? Like, what if it becomes too awesome? Like, it becomes where, like, you know, we have our real life now, but then we have like our internet life, but we all know we have to hold on to this real life. This is our real life. The internet life's cool and all, but it's not enough to like completely steal away our real life. But what if the metaverse life is like so good? Like, it's so great that we hate our real life. We just,
you know, it's funny,
stand it.
Not to get like philosophical or anything like that, but humans, anytime they encounter like the first wave of a technology, we don't know how to handle it, and we get a lot of bad things that come with it, right? Because we saw it with video games, then we saw it with social media and so forth. But eventually, like, we evolve beyond it, where we know the pitfalls and the things, and it becomes less of a problem. And I feel like what you're saying, when the real immersive metaverse comes along, we're going to have problems. Like, people are going to be in it too much, and then you're going to have societal issues and social issues, but then we'll evolve beyond it. But that period is painful.
You're right.
To go through.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So
how to cope with this, how to enjoy your real life.
Yeah, we have to come back to the balance, right? We go off to the spectrum one side and spectrum too much, and then we come back to the middle.
Good point.
Okay, rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
Okay. I always tell my wife, I'm gonna only live on one thing, and I don't eat it, but macaroni and cheese. I would eat macaroni and cheese all day, every day. I would eat brisket.
Oh, brisket, yeah.
Alfredo, fettuccine Alfredo. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And seafood. I love seafood.
Me too. Favorite musician or band?
Oh, that's always evolving and changing. But you know, I go back to just the stuff that was popular for me in like high school and stuff, which was like Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, Eminem. Those are probably my go-to classics, and I still pull them up in Spotify. But I got my occasional stuff that's new and fresh that I'll listen to. But those are my go-tos.
I love Linkin Park, man. I listened to a lot of Linkin Park back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Oh, favorite movie?
I don't really watch movies, but I'll watch series. So I'll like binge series. And like one of them that like not everybody loves, but I loved it, and I've literally watched the whole thing 5 to 7 times, is Lost. I've watched Lost many times. I've watched Squid Games so many times. It's questionable why I've done that. That's psychologically weird that I've watched it that many times and like watch it as I go to bed. That's very, very weird, but I've watched it so many times. I like Ozark and King of the Hill, man. I love me a good Hank Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love Squid Game. It's really good. I was actually talking to my wife. I want to watch it again because it was so good. Lost, I don't know how you keep watching that. I was a big fan of Lost until the end, and then I was like, no, why did you end it this way?
My wife and I still have debates about that. I'm like, look, it's not the ending. It was the journey to get there. Didn't you enjoy the journey?
I did, but man, the ending was ruined it for me. Okay, favorite book.
Favorite book. I really liked the Hunger Games books. I read all 3 of them, and I read them in a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Except Katniss, man. She's so whiny in the books. All right, go ahead. Sorry, brother.
No. You're good. Okay, so well, maybe this answer, I know the answer to this. What's your hobby, your pastime?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the candid answer, because I've answered this it's charting is always, it's just like a passion of mine. But outside of that, disc golf and golfing and barbecuing, high intensity interval training, and playing with the kids. And I do like video games, but I don't have time for them, or I don't have the patience for it. I don't know why I can't sit down and do it, but I can't. But I love them, but I can't play them. It's a weird thing. We won't. Yeah. And then I actually just do a lot of walking, man. I don't mind going outside and just walking for 2 miles, just to kind of finish off the day. So
you and I have a lot in common. I will do that too, just to clear my mind, especially the social media era. I just want to unplug and just walk and see and hear nature.
Yeah. Get away from the metaverse, bro. Yeah, I know. I agree. I would say I walk 2 miles 5 times a week.
Oh, yeah, wow.
At least.
Good, man.
Just for the sake of it. Yeah.
It's good physically and mentally. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Blockchain backer. Pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I had a great time, Tony. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.